You were never meant to know this. From the moment you were born, a veil was placed over your eyes, not made of cloth but of culture, language, and blind tradition, and behind that veil rituals were taking place. Not random, not theatrical, but exact, purposeful, designed to do one thing: bind energy and direct it. You've seen the symbols even if you didn't know what you were looking at. The square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the checkerboard floor. You might have thought they were aesthetic choices or relics of ancient geometry, but they were codes, frequencies, gateways. You see, in the highest levels of secret orders, like the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, ritual isn't superstition, it's circuitry. Every gesture, every object, every oath spoken within the lodge operates like lines of spiritual code. You're not just acting them out, you're running them, and as you do, you become the conduit. Imagine stepping into a room, the lights dimmed just enough to make your skin tighten, robes, candles, a book on a pedestal. The Bible, yes, but not used how you expect. A blindfold covers your eyes, but your spirit senses the shift. You hear phrases about light, about seeking truth, about entering darkness to find understanding. But what you don't know is that with every word, you're giving permission. With every yes, with every vow, your energy is being marked. This isn't metaphor, this is frequency manipulation. Ancient initiates believed words themselves carry vibration, and when spoken under specific conditions, within a sacred geometry, like a lodge, those vibrations can alter spiritual DNA. Freemasons have known this for centuries. That's why oaths in these rituals are often for life, not because you can't leave physically, but because the energetic tie doesn't break with distance, it only breaks with renunciation. If you've ever felt something strange when entering a government building, a cathedral, or even an old Masonic temple, it's because you were walking through a field of concentrated intention. Buildings don't just house people, they hold energy. And when a space is designed using sacred geometry, aligned with planetary points and consecrated with ritual, what you get is a battery, a storage unit for spiritual power. And here's what makes it even more unsettling. The tools used in these rituals aren't chosen randomly. The square represents structure, the compass, limitation and containment, the veil, separation between dimensions, and the Bible. The Bible isn't always read in reverence. Sometimes it's simply used as a prop, placed beneath the foot during an oath, flipped to passages never read aloud, covered by the symbols of the craft. In those cases, it's not a guide, it's an energetic contract. Now, imagine this. You're standing in that lodge. You repeat a vow you barely understand, swearing allegiance to a brotherhood, to secrecy, even to death. You press your hand to your chest in a gesture passed down through generations. But that gesture? It's not just symbolic. It's an energetic signal. A binding motion connecting your physical act with spiritual implication. You're marked, energetically encoded. And here's the part no one tells you. Once that doorway is opened, you don't get to decide what steps through it. There are reasons initiates experience strange dreams after ceremony, why some report heightened abilities while others spiral into depression, confusion, even possession. Because when you participate in these rites, you're not just reciting ancient words, you're activating ancient energies, and not all of them are benevolent. The higher you go in these systems, the more the rituals shift. They begin with lectures and symbols, but they evolve into something far more intense. Sexual rites, energy transference, blood. You're taught that duality is sacred, that male and female energy must be fused, often through physical acts, to channel higher power, and in some orders this doctrine becomes a license to vampirize energy, especially from the uninitiated. It's why high-level rituals often happen behind closed doors, at hours when the city sleeps, in places where outsiders can't hear the chants, can't smell the incense, can't feel the shift in the air. because what's being done isn't for the curious, it's for the committed. And yet, this knowledge isn't just confined to Freemasonry. You'll find its echoes in Mormon temple rituals, where initiates wear symbolic garments, speak secret names, and perform ceremonial handshakes shockingly similar to Masonic rites. In witchcraft, where circles are cast and energy is summoned with intention. In druidic practice, where the elements are called upon, and offerings are made to unseen entities in return for power or insight. Even satanic rites, where covenants are made explicitly, follow the same structure: ritual space, invocation, vow, offering, and energetic transaction. The script changes, the entities do not. So, why does this matter to you? Because the same energetic technology used in these secret places is now being repackaged and pushed out to the masses. It's in music videos, fashion, films, award shows. You think you're watching entertainment, but you're witnessing ritual, openings, offerings, bindings. You scroll past the images of checkerboard patterns, veiled faces, hand signs, and think nothing of it. But your subconscious doesn't scroll past. It absorbs, it mirrors, it resonates. Energy is being manipulated all around you, and without knowing it, you're being made into a participant. And the moment you agree, even passively, even silently, you enter the ritual too. But here's the most dangerous part. When you chase these mysteries, when you hunger for forbidden knowledge, what you're really hungering for is power. And power always comes with a cost. When I was deep in it, initiated, robed, surrounded by brothers who claimed we were working for light, I felt powerful. But behind that power there was always a presence, watching, feeding, waiting. And in the silence between the rituals, in the stillness after the oaths, I began to feel it. The weight, the drain, the cold silence of a pact made in ignorance. I couldn't admit it at first. I told myself it was just part of the process, that the darkness was necessary, that secrecy was sacred. But deep inside my soul was screaming. I traded my inner knowing for borrowed symbols, my freedom for spiritual bondage, and the moment I realized it was the moment everything started to crack. You didn't start out chasing darkness, you were chasing truth, something deeper than religion, more ancient than philosophy. The sermons didn't satisfy you, the routines felt hollow, and deep down you knew there had to be more, something real, something powerful. That hunger wasn't a flaw, it was a signal, and someone, some force, heard it. At first it came through whispers, conversations with people who knew things, books that weren't sold in chain stores, mentors who promised enlightenment if you were willing to leave behind the simple answers and step into something higher, or lower, depending on how you look at it now. And then came the invitation. Maybe it was subtle, maybe it was masked as tradition, as heritage, as a prestigious lineage of thinkers and builders. That's how it's often sold. Freemasonry, the Brotherhood, a society of men committed to moral virtue, personal development, and the betterment of humanity. That's the public face, the handshake and smile, the charitable events and scholarships, the polished speeches and ancient quotes etched into marble. But beneath that face is a skeleton, a secret skeleton, one you only start to see once the door closes and the ceremony begins. The first time you walk into a Masonic lodge, it feels theatrical, at least on the surface. Dimmed lighting, a ritual chamber meticulously set up, every item positioned with intention, the scent of something old in the air, like incense mixed with dust and something you can't quite name. It smells like memory, like something has been lingering there longer than the building itself. You're blindfolded. That's not just tradition, that's initiation. Symbolic, yes, but also energetic. The removal of sight forces inner dependence. You're being stripped of your outer senses so that the ritual can work, deeper, through vibration, suggestion, and surrender. Then the voices begin. A question. A prompt. Do you seek light? And you answer, though you don't fully know what you're agreeing to. That's the point. Consent is given not through understanding but through compliance. You are now clay. As you're led through the steps, the floor beneath your feet feels charged. It's not the room, it's the energy being summoned into the room. Every Masonic lodge is built on sacred measurements, ratios that align with celestial forces, geometry designed to amplify intention. The men around you aren't just playing parts, they're acting as archetypes. The worshipful master, the senior deacon, the tiler, each has a role, and that role is rooted in occult hierarchy. You think you're participating in ceremony, but in truth, you're stepping into an ancient operating system, a ritual software that predates modern religion. And then comes the oath. You're asked to swear secrecy, to commit yourself fully to the brotherhood. You repeat the words, unaware of their weight. You say things like, binding myself under no lesser penalty than having my throat cut, thinking it's figurative, thinking it's symbolic. But symbols are never just symbols in ritual. They are frequency markers. They imprint. In that moment, your spoken word, amplified by intention, surrounded by specific architecture, echoed by others, is not just a promise. It's a vibrational agreement, a binding. Spoken oaths, especially in sacred space, are more than formality. They are contracts, energetic contracts. And in this system, words don't just inform, they transform. Now, let's talk about what you see once the blindfold is removed. Your eyes adjust. And the first thing you often notice? The all-seeing eye. Usually placed prominently above the master's chair, it stares down, unblinking, watching everything. You're told it represents the eye of God, divine providence, enlightenment. But it's not that simple. The eye, in this context, is about surveillance and spiritual jurisdiction. It means something or someone is always watching, and not from heaven, but from within the system you just entered. It's an energetic tag, a declaration that your spiritual signature now exists within a closed loop. And then there's the square and compass. These are more than emblems of moral uprightness or geometry. The compass represents limitation, how far you're allowed to stretch. The square represents judgment, how straight you walk the line. Together, they define the box you're in. Spiritually, they form a gate, a sigil that marks not just the organization, but the spiritual boundary you're agreeing to stay within. And what about the veil? Ah, yes, the veil. You'll find veils in every initiation system, sometimes literal, sometimes metaphorical, always present. It separates the profane from the initiated. It marks the threshold between the ordinary and the sacred. But here's what they don't tell you. When you pass through the veil, it's not just a change of scenery. It's a spiritual handover. Your consciousness, your energy field, your alignment shifts. You've stepped from the outer world into a space encoded with layers of intention, layers you don't yet understand. It's like walking into a web, not to be caught necessarily, but to be repatterned, and you feel it. Something internal begins to rearrange. You tell yourself it's nerves, or the weight of symbolism, but deep down you feel it's more. Your body might not understand the ancient language being spoken, but your spirit does. And your spirit is responding. You leave that room different. More than that, you're marked. It doesn't matter that it was only the first degree. Every layer of Freemasonry is a rung on a ladder. And once you touch the ladder, even the bottom rung, your energy is linked to its architecture. That's how these systems work. They don't need your full understanding, they just need your agreement. And the more you climb, the more your energetic sovereignty is tested. Higher degrees aren't just about secret handshakes and deeper philosophy, they're about power, manipulation, the ability to direct energy, yours and others. And as you rise, the rituals shift. They become darker, more esoteric, less symbolic, more literal. But even in the first ritual, something was activated. You've probably heard people speak of the 33rd degree as if it's the pinnacle of enlightenment. the highest honor, the final key. But what if I told you that the 33rd degree isn't about recognition? It's about permission. It's not a badge, it's a threshold. The moment you cross into that territory, everything shifts. The handshakes stop being metaphor. The symbols stop being allegory. The words stop being lessons. Because now you're not just learning the system, you become the system. The 33rd degree is less about rank and more about access. It's where the veil between ritual and reality is finally lifted. The secrecy isn't to protect you from the world, it's to protect the world from what you're about to handle. Because up to this point you've only seen the shadow of the machine, the pageantry, the coded language. But once you step behind the final curtain, you discover something most will never accept. These rituals are not performances, they are energetic operations. Everything about the 33rd is designed to tap into something ancient, something that predates written history. The architecture of the lodge changes, the tools change, even the way the air feels in the room changes. You don't just feel nervous, you feel watched, not by men, but by presence. At this level, the language of energy replaces the language of intellect. The goal isn't to teach your mind, it's to program your field, to bypass the conscious self and rewire the layers of your being that exist beneath thought. And they do it with precision. Take the ritual structure itself. Every step is choreographed, every word, a frequency. The positioning of the body, the posture, the objects in the room, they're not props, they're instruments. Energetic tuning forks designed to resonate with very specific frequencies. Frequencies that open you up and mark you. But it goes deeper. The 33rd degree is where duality becomes doctrine, where the symbols of opposites are no longer abstract, they're embodied. The sun and the moon, the right and left pillar, masculine and feminine forces aren't just ideas to contemplate. They become forces you're told to balance, merge, and eventually channel. This is where sexual alchemy enters. Not in the way pop culture presents it, casual, sensual, or spontaneous. It's ritualized, it's structured, it's purposeful. The union of opposites is believed to create a charge, and that charge isn't for pleasure, it's for power. Participants in these rites are often instructed, either symbolically or literally, to act out the merging of male and female polarities in sacred space. In some systems, this is symbolic. In others, it's literal. And when it's literal, it becomes dangerous. Because what's being exchanged isn't just intimacy, it's essence. You become the battery, and the ritual becomes the circuit. These acts are often called sacred. They're said to raise kundalini, awaken divinity, or invoke cosmic understanding. But what's rarely said aloud is this. When you open yourself in these states, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, you become penetrable on every level. Your field opens, your guard drops, and entities can enter. Because in this moment, you're not just a participant. You're the gateway. And that's the secret no one dares to speak. The ritual is not about you. It's about what moves through you. This is where energy vampirism becomes real. It's not always as theatrical as blood rituals or dark robes. Sometimes it's clean, hidden behind silk veils and ancient chants. But the effect is the same. Your life force is being harvested, redistributed, and often given to something unseen. These entities, they don't wear names you'd recognize. They don't walk in with horns or red eyes. They arrive in silence. They respond to invitation. And these rituals, they are the invitation. Because energy always seeks a channel. When a group of initiates gathers in a sacred space, aligned under oath, vibrating in unison through chant, posture, symbol, and submission, they become that channel. Energy flows where attention goes, and the ritual focuses all attention into a single collective offering. But who are you offering it to? That question is never answered directly. Instead, it's hidden behind layers of symbolism, behind names like the Great Architect, the Hidden Light, the Inner Flame. These titles sound noble, sacred. But what do they mean? When you strip away the language and examine the effect, what's left, you've got drained participants, silent oaths, psychological fragmentation, a constant need for secrecy, a life filled with power but absent of peace. Because the real power in these rituals isn't in the information, it's in the energy exchange. And that's why secrecy matters so much. The potency of these rites only holds if you don't break the spell, and silence is what sustains the spell. The moment you speak about it, question it, shine light on it, the power begins to dissipate, because exposure diffuses energy. Truth breaks illusions, and these systems are built entirely on veiled truths. You've probably heard the phrase, the ritual is the spell, but it's more than that. You are the spell, your body, your voice, your belief, your fear, your silence. You become the living conduit for the energetic program being run through that space. The circle isn't just drawn on the ground. It's drawn around your life. It follows you. It echoes through your decisions, your relationships, your thoughts. And here's the most chilling part. You don't feel it immediately. At first you feel empowered. You feel chosen, elevated. You start to notice synchronicities. You get promotions. People respect you. Life bends in strange ways to your advantage. But underneath the surface, something else is happening. Your dreams grow darker. Your intuition grows quieter. Your connection to innocence, to simplicity, to pure spiritual light, it dims. Slowly, quietly. You become more efficient, more powerful, but less human. Because the light you're drawing from isn't the kind that gives, it's the kind that trades. And that's how the system is sustained. It's not about worshipping demons or sacrificing animals. The real danger is subtler. It's energetic alignment. Once you align your field with that of the ritual, through oath, through participation, through belief, you become its frequency. And frequencies replicate. You carry it with you, into your family, your work, your spiritual life. You can still read scripture, still pray, still attend church, but something will feel off, distant, muted, because you've bound yourself to a system that whispers in tongues older than language. You don't hear the whisper, but your soul does. And if you're quiet enough, you'll feel it. You've been taught that symbols are just pictures, just shapes, abstract decorations to represent higher ideas. But if that were true, if symbols were meaningless, why do secret societies obsess over them? Why are they carved into stone, worn on skin, hidden in architecture, embedded into rituals, and passed down across centuries? Because symbols aren't passive, they're alive. Every time a symbol is repeated, it reinforces a frequency, a loop, and when that symbol is charged with ritual energy, when it's used in sacred oaths, meditations, or ceremonies, it doesn't just represent something, it becomes something. Let's talk about the handshake. To most, it's a greeting, a gesture of respect. But in Freemasonry, a handshake is a signature. Each degree has its own variation, known as a grip or token, and these are not arbitrary. They are keys, not to doors, but to energy systems, to spiritual contracts. When you give a Masonic handshake, you're not just acknowledging rank, you're transmitting energy. And more importantly, you're acknowledging an oath, a binding agreement, often made unconsciously in the beginning but reinforced every time the gesture is repeated. The same is true of the words spoken during these interactions. Passwords, names, phrases that seem cryptic on the outside but are vibrationally specific. Each one connects you to a level of initiation, a layer of the system's energetic architecture. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. These same gestures appear in Mormon temple rituals. You're not told this when you first enter the faith. You're not warned, but once you reach the temple and go through the endowment ceremony, the similarities hit you like a wave. You're given garments, white, symbolic, meant to represent purity. You enter rooms laid out in a progression, creation, fall, atonement. And you are taught gestures, specific handshakes known as tokens, alongside secret names and ritual phrases. You're blindfolded at first, then you're passed from station to station. You covenant to give everything: time, talents, possessions, even your life, if necessary. You move through veils. You whisper secret words through fabric. You repeat movements you don't understand, but you comply because everyone else does. Because you're told it's sacred. But what makes it sacred? Who told you that these gestures were holy? Who decided these names, these motions, these veils were the path to light? No one ever tells you where these rituals came from. They don't show you the Masonic blueprints. They don't tell you that Joseph Smith was initiated into Freemasonry just weeks before establishing the temple rites, that entire sections of the ceremony were copied directly from Masonic ritual. And here's the terrifying implication. If the rituals are the same, could the energy be the same too? What happens when thousands of people unknowingly enact a ritual built on a different system, one they never consented to in awareness? What kind of energy are they invoking? What entities are being acknowledged? What oaths are being spoken into reality without fully understanding their spiritual cost? Because energy doesn't respond to your intentions, it responds to your agreements. When you mimic a gesture, even without knowing what it means, you align with the frequency behind it. That's why imitation is so dangerous. You think you're performing a gesture of faith, but in the spiritual realm, you're signing a contract. And the most effective contracts are the ones you don't question. That's how psychological traps are built. Through repetition, through normalization, through beauty and community and the comfort of belonging. They dress the ritual in white. They set it to soft music. They surround you with friends and family, all smiling, all participating, and in that safety, your discernment is lulled to sleep. You repeat the words. You press your hand in the right shape. You place it on the right part of the body. You bow. You receive a name. You perform the signs. And with each one your spirit moves deeper into alignment, not with God, but with a system built on mimicry. You're told these gestures will save you, that one day you'll approach a veil in the afterlife and your salvation will depend on your ability to perform the ritual correctly. That's not a message of grace. That's spiritual programming. Because it plants a fear inside you, a fear that if you ever walk away, if you ever question, you'll lose access to eternity. But the truth is, your spirit was never meant to be chained to symbols. You weren't created to serve a system of tokens and signs. You were created to commune directly with the divine, without intermediaries, without coded rituals, without secret passwords whispered behind veils. The moment you give your authority away to a ritual, you cut off your direct connection. Not because the divine withdraws from you, but because you withdraw from your own sovereignty. And that's exactly how these systems maintain power. They create dependency. You're taught that you can't access heaven without the ritual. You're told that salvation must be earned through performance. You're convinced that safety lies in silence, but silence is where the spell grows stronger. Because every time you repeat the motions without questioning them, every time you obey out of fear of exclusion, every time you wear a symbol without knowing its origin, you feed the spell, and the spell doesn't need you to believe it. It only needs you to repeat it. That's the energetic layer most people never see. They think that if they don't mean it, it can't affect them. That if their heart is pure, they're safe. But energy doesn't measure purity, it measures resonance. When your body forms a gesture charged with ancient power, when your mouth speaks words forged in ritual architecture, when your spirit bows before veiled meanings, you become part of the frequency. You become the host. And that's the real danger. Because the system doesn't just live in the temple or the lodge. It lives in you, in your habits, your dreams, your subconscious beliefs. And unless you break the agreement not just with your mouth, but with your energy, you carry it with you. Everywhere. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Once you've touched the edge of one system, others begin to reveal themselves. Not by invitation this time, but by momentum, because once your field is open, the veil is thinner, and where you once had to search for the occult, now it starts finding you. You begin to see symbols everywhere. Sigils etched into graffiti, hand signs flashed in music videos, moon cycles paired with strange social trends. You think it's coincidence? Then one night you're invited to something different. A circle in the woods, a fire by the river, a gathering in an old Victorian home. They don't call it Satanism, not at first. They use words like energy work, earth-based tradition, ancestral wisdom, sacred rites. And if you're spiritually hungry, if you're still chasing that deep, forbidden knowing, it all sounds beautiful. You want to understand. You want to feel the power they speak of so reverently. And that's when the door opens. Witchcraft initiations are not what Hollywood shows you. There are no broomsticks or green potions. It's cleaner, more precise. There are candles for each element, herbs chosen not for aroma but for vibration, a blade laid on the altar not for violence but for sacrifice. Of what? That depends. Your identity. Your old self, a fragment of your soul. The first time you watch or participate in a ritual invoking elemental spirits, you feel something shift in the air when they cast a circle. They're not just drawing lines in the dirt. They're creating a portal. When they call the corners north, south, east, west, they're not reciting poetry. They're dialing into a grid. And once the grid is activated, you're not alone anymore. It doesn't always feel dark. Sometimes it feels euphoric. You feel expanded, connected, like your skin has become a conduit for something massive and ancient. But if you've been in it long enough, you start to notice something else, something underneath the light. There's always a cost. In Druidic circles, the reverence for the earth is sincere. The rituals are ancient. Ceremonies are built around solstices, equinoxes, harvest moons. You chant, you walk labyrinths. You dance in robes of white under the stars. But behind the beauty, the energy is not always pure. It depends on who's guiding you. Because not all spirits in the earth realm are here to elevate you. Some mimic the light just enough to gain access. They feed on attention, on blood, on lust, on fear. And when you open yourself in ritual, when you chant in trance states or cut your palm and drip blood onto soil, you're not just honoring nature. You're entering an agreement. A soul-sealed ceremony isn't always declared with a contract and a pen. Often it begins with desperation, a whispered offering. Take whatever you want. Just give me what I seek. Sometimes it's said in jest, sometimes with full intention. But in the spiritual realm there is no sarcasm. Every word is a doorway. You might think you're being theatrical, that you're acting, exploring, experimenting, but when you lay down in the middle of a summoning circle naked under moonlight and invite whatever spirit is listening into your life, you've stepped past the point of pretend. These forces are real, and they are listening. In satanic systems, the power dynamics are clearer. You're not pretending to honor life. You're declaring yourself as God. You renounce all higher authority. You mock religion. You invert every sacred symbol you once held dear, and in that inversion you feel free. At first, the rituals are bolder. Blood is no longer metaphor. Sex is no longer sacred. Everything is designed to break the limits of the soul. You're taught that boundaries are lies, that shame is weakness, that pain is power, and the more you transgress, the more power you feel. Until you don't, because after the rush comes the crash. After the ceremony comes the silence, the hollow echo, the lingering sense that something else followed you home, and it doesn't stop at your doorstep. You start seeing things, shadows in mirrors, whispers when you're alone. You wake up tired, anxious, disconnected from your body. You try to ground yourself, but you can't. Something's always watching, waiting, mocking you from the corners of your mind. This isn't paranoia, it's aftermath. Because once you've given something permission to inhabit your space, it doesn't leave just because you wanted to. You gave it the key. Ritual sacrifice isn't always about killing animals. Sometimes it's sacrificing your voice, your intuition, your innocence, piece by piece. Every time you say yes to a ritual you don't fully understand, every time you repeat an incantation you didn't write, every time you submit your will to the group, to the circle, to the dark altar, you give away more than time. You give away fragments of your soul. And the hardest part? You don't even realize it until you try to leave. That's when you see how bound you really are. Your thoughts aren't your own anymore, your dreams are corrupted, your energy is fractured. It feels like you're bleeding, but there's no wound, no bandage will stop it, no therapy will explain it, because the damage wasn't psychological, it was spiritual. And once you've seen what moves in those rituals, you can't unsee it. You realize these weren't games, they weren't symbolic acts of rebellion or spiritual curiosity. You were playing with real fire. And the fire didn't care what your intention was, it only cared that you showed up, that you stood in the circle, that you chanted the names, that you offered yourself, even unknowingly. Because in the realm of energy, ignorance is not innocence, it's vulnerability. Every oath you took, every sigil you drew, every ritual you participated in, whether you understood it or not, left a mark. And those marks don't wash off with holy water. They have to be broken, cancelled, renounced. Because the energy you've tangled with isn't neutral, it's sticky, it's possessive. And once it sees you as useful, it won't let go without a fight. The worst part isn't the nightmares. It isn't the strange visions or the feeling of being followed by something you can't name. It's the silence. The emptiness you start to feel inside, as if some core part of you has been unplugged, like your soul's voice is echoing down a hallway where no one's listening. You try to pray, but the words feel dry. You try to meditate, but your thoughts turn dark. You try to connect with others, but no one sees what you've seen. And when you try to explain it, they call you crazy, dramatic, delusional. So you stay silent, again, and that silence wraps around you like a cloak. This is what happens when your soul coherence shatters. You lose sense of who you are, because you gave yourself to too many altars. You said yes to too many energies. You broke your own boundaries in the name of power, wisdom, initiation. And now you're fragmented, scattered, incomplete. And somewhere inside, you know it. You know that every ceremony came with a price. Every oath locked a door. Every ritual placed another thread around your spirit, until the fire you once sought for illumination became the very thing burning your house down from within. You were playing with real fire, and fire doesn't care what your reason was. But even as the smoke rises, even as your inner world feels like ash, something begins to whisper. Not like the spirits you called before, not like the voices that mocked you in the dark. This one feels different, calmer, clearer. It doesn't demand, it invites. It doesn't pull, it opens. And suddenly you realize, maybe you weren't meant to carry all of this. Maybe the power you sought wasn't something to seize, but something to surrender to. Maybe escape isn't rebellion. Maybe it's return. You can only carry the weight for so long. Eventually the pressure turns inward. You feel it in your chest first, a tightness like something is pressing against your ribs from the inside. It comes during quiet moments, when you're alone, when there are no chants, no candles, no rituals to distract you. Your energy begins to splinter. You don't recognize yourself anymore. Something feels off, like you're living in your body but not fully inside it. You go through the motions, but you're on autopilot. You smile, but your spirit isn't smiling with you. And then the dreams start. At first they're strange but subtle. Symbols, faces, voices you almost remember but can't place. But they intensify. You wake up with your heart pounding. Sometimes you feel like you're choking. Other times, like someone is in the room with you, watching, waiting. You try to ground yourself. You return to the rituals, the incense, the cleansing baths, the mantras, but nothing works. In fact, it only gets worse. The energy in the room turns heavy the moment you begin. The air feels thick, electric. You used to feel empowered by these ceremonies. Now you feel stalked. Your thoughts turn dark, not just intrusive, but predatory. You feel guilt, but also confusion. How could something that promised light leave you feeling so hollow? You try to rationalize it. Maybe you're just not doing it right. Maybe your vibration is too low. Maybe you need to go deeper. But your soul knows. There comes a moment when the illusion cracks, when the mask slips. You see it in the reflection after a ritual. In your eyes. They're tired, drained, the light behind them dimmed. You realize you've been trading pieces of yourself for power that was never yours to hold. And then it hits you, the truth you never wanted to admit. This power isn't neutral. It takes always, no matter how it's dressed, no matter how sacred the symbols or poetic the chants. There's a hunger behind it, a drain, and you're the fuel. And when you try to leave, that's when the war begins. Nightmares become violent. You see the faces of spirits you once welcomed turn twisted, angry. Objects in your home move. Shadows dart across the room. You hear voices in your sleep, whispering your name. You feel watched. All the time. The same rituals that once brought you comfort now feel like traps. You burn the books. You throw away the tools. You delete the sigils, the notes, the recordings, and for a moment you think you're free. But the spiritual retaliation doesn't stop. Because you didn't just pick up a hobby. You entered a covenant. You opened doors in your soul that don't shut easily. You don't leave the occult like you leave a job. You leave it like escaping a cult. A spiritual entanglement, a web that bites back when you tear it. You cry out. But not to the moon this time, not to the spirits, not to the universe. You cry out to the one name you avoided for years, Jesus. Not in a performative way, not in a church pew with your hands politely folded. You cry out like someone drowning, like someone being hunted, like someone whose spirit is breaking open and there's only one place left to run. And when you say his name, something happens. Not dramatic at first, no flashes of light, no lightning bolt from the sky, just a shift. A peace, a warmth, a stillness. And for the first time in months, no presence watching, no mockery in your head, just quiet. You don't even realize you're crying until you taste salt, because this light, it doesn't demand anything. It doesn't drain, it doesn't dominate, it simply fills. You fall asleep that night without ritual, without protection spells, without chants, and you sleep, not like before, slightly, anxiously, half awake. You sleep fully, like your spirit exhaled for the first time in years. When you wake up, everything feels the same but different. The room hasn't changed, but the atmosphere has. You can still feel the residue of what once lived there, but it's fading, weakening, because the power of that darkness was never sustained by itself. It was fed by your belief, your fear, your agreement, and now you're breaking the agreement. It doesn't happen all at once. The battles don't end overnight. The nightmares might still come, the attacks might still flare, but now you have a weapon you never had before. Truth. And truth doesn't beg for power. It doesn't demand secrecy. It doesn't need your performance. It just is. You start to realize the energy that truly heals doesn't come through performance. It comes through surrender. And the light that transforms isn't earned through rituals. It's received. When you finally stop trying to earn it, you begin to renounce the covenants, not just with words, but with authority. You speak them out loud. You cancel every oath you made under deception. You reclaim every part of your spirit that was bound in ceremony. And you don't do it with fear. You do it with the name that darkness flees from, Jesus. Not as a religious figure, but as a living source. The only one you've met that doesn't require a ritual to respond. The only one who gave his life so you wouldn't have to trade yours away. The energy in your home begins to lift. You start having clear dreams, gentle ones, no voices, no shadows, just light. And as you step into that light more fully, you realize something profound. The light you were chasing in those rituals wasn't wrong, but you were seeking it through mirrors, through symbols, through systems built to mimic what only the divine can give. The real light was never behind the veil. It was waiting behind surrender. You thought you had to climb ladders, memorize codes, whisper secrets through veils, but in the end all it took was one honest cry for help, one whisper of a name that had been buried beneath years of ritual noise, and that name broke the spell. Because light isn't something you earn through precision. It's something you receive through repentance. And power, real power, the kind that restores instead of consumes, doesn't come from calling down spirits. It comes from returning to the one who created your spirit in the first place, the one who never needed your oaths to love you, the one who saw every ritual you performed in darkness and still waited patiently for your surrender. Jesus doesn't require secrecy. He doesn't demand symbolic handshakes or hidden names. He offers freedom, not through ritual, but through grace. And the moment you step into that grace, the chains fall, not because you broke them, but because you no longer believed in them. You no longer fed them. And now, finally, you're ready, not just to escape, but to be delivered. Deliverance doesn't begin with a ceremony. It begins with a decision. You don't need robes. You don't need candles. You don't need to chant his name 100 times to be heard. All you need is truth and a heart ready to surrender. That's the difference. In the occult, you were always chasing power, trying to ascend, initiation after initiation, ritual after ritual, hoping that if you went deep enough, memorized enough, sacrificed enough, you'd finally find the peace you were promised. But peace never came, because those systems were built on performance, hierarchy, control. In Christ, everything is reversed. The more you let go, the more you're filled. The more you confess, the more you're healed. The more you surrender, the more authority you gain, not over others, over the darkness that once ruled you. Real spiritual authority isn't loud. It's not theatrical. It's rooted in something that doesn't shift. Truth. The truth of who you are. The truth of what he did. The truth that nothing you ever did in the dark was too strong for the light to shatter. And so the real work begins. You begin renouncing, not just symbolically, but specifically, out loud, with authority. You speak the names of every ritual you were part of. You name every group, every entity, every oath. You cancel every agreement you made, knowingly or unknowingly. You break soul ties. You reject spiritual imposters. You sever access to your energy, your dreams, your body, your lineage. You reclaim your sovereignty. And as you do, something breaks. Not always with a scream. Sometimes with a sigh. Sometimes with uncontrollable tears. Sometimes with heat rising in your body or the sensation of something leaving you. Because something is leaving you. You're being delivered. And yes, the darkness will fight back. There may be days when you feel like you're suffocating, nights when the voices come back, whispering lies, moments when the guilt creeps in, telling you it's too late, that you've gone too far. But now you know better. Because now you've seen what real power feels like. It doesn't bind, it frees. It doesn't demand, it restores. It doesn't confuse, it clarifies, and above all it loves, not conditionally, not through codes or ranks or rituals, but completely, freely. For the first time, you feel safe, not because the room is cleansed or the symbols are aligned or the energy is flowing right, but because the presence of God has filled the space where fear used to live. You feel peace, not the fleeting peace you used to chase through spellwork or breathwork or crystals, but the kind of peace that settles into your bones, the kind that whispers, "You're home." You begin to read Scripture, not as an obligation, but as a revelation. The words don't feel foreign anymore. They speak to places inside you that were silent for years. Verses become mirrors. Stories become anchors. And suddenly, you're not searching anymore. You're remembering. Because your spirit always knew, it just got buried under layers of spiritual counterfeits. You see the contrast so clearly now. The occult needed secrecy. Christianity offers truth. The lodge required oaths. Jesus requires repentance. The rituals demanded performance. God just wants your heart. There's no hierarchy in the kingdom, no elite class, no special name you have to whisper through a veil. You don't have to earn access to the throne. The veil was torn. You're not climbing steps to heaven. You've already been seated in heavenly places. And that's the truth the enemy never wanted you to realize. You didn't need hidden knowledge, you needed healing. You didn't need more power, you needed purity. You didn't need to master symbols, you needed to surrender your soul to the one who made it. That's what deliverance really is. Not a dramatic performance, but a deep cleansing, a spiritual detox, a purification of the places you thought were too dark to redeem. And it's not just about casting something out, it's about letting something in. His presence, His Spirit, His authority. Because when His light fills the space, there's no more room for darkness to hide. You no longer live under fear of retaliation. You no longer carry shame like a second skin. You no longer wonder if you're cursed, marked, or too far gone. You are made new. You are covered. You are sovereign under His covering, and that sovereignty isn't aggressive. It's quiet, firm, clear. You can walk into any space and know that nothing there has permission to touch you unless you allow it. You're no longer a match for those old energies because you've changed frequency. You don't fight them with spells or counter-rituals. You fight them by standing in your identity. You are His. And when you say that name, Jesus, it's not a chant, it's not a password, it's a declaration of truth. It's a sword, and the darkness still trembles when you speak it. You don't belong to the systems you once served. You don't belong to the spirits you once entertained. You don't belong to the lies that once whispered you were too far gone. You belong to the one who wrote your name before time began, and He never changed His mind. There's no ritual required, no temple veil to pass through, no secret knowledge left to uncover. You've found the truth, and the truth has found you. You are clean, you are covered, and most of all, you are free. But freedom isn't just something you feel, it's something you declare. Because even now, even after all the healing, there's one final act that seals the break. One last declaration that unbinds every remnant, every hidden chain, every lingering echo of the dark systems you once walked in. This is more than closure. This is war in the spirit. This is the final renunciation. And when you speak it, not with fear but with boldness, you'll feel the last walls fall. And on the other side, total freedom. You were never alone in this, not for a moment. Right now, there are millions of people, just like you, being drawn into this vortex under the illusion of light, knowledge, and empowerment. They're not joining temples or dark covens. They're clicking on guided meditations, following Instagram gurus, wearing pendants that pulse with ancient sigils, repeating mantras with no idea what they're invoking. Because now the occult doesn't look like a black robe in the woods. It looks like healing, it sounds like self-love, it wears the mask of empowerment, and behind it all is the same old system. Freemasonic symbolism is no longer hidden behind stone lodges. It's glowing behind pop stars on the biggest stages in the world. It's flashed in music videos, movies, and fashion lines. One eye, hidden hands, jewel pillars, sun-moon alignments, triangles over hearts. It's not art, it's architecture, a language, a signal. And the more it's repeated, the more the collective becomes desensitized. Because symbolism isn't just about communication, it's about activation. The world is being initiated without even realizing it. Energy is the new battlefield. Attention is the weapon, and your soul, that's the territory. You don't have to sign your name in blood anymore. All you have to do is agree. Agree by wearing it, sharing it, speaking it, allowing it. And the enemy is clever. He doesn't need you to become a full-blown Satanist. He just needs you spiritually numb, curious enough to experiment, prideful enough to think you're immune, passive enough to not resist. That's why spiritual warfare is real. It's not superstition, it's structure. The systems are ancient, but the packaging has evolved. It's being taught in yoga studios, sprinkled into business seminars, embedded in children's shows. And if you're not anchored in truth, you'll absorb it without question, because it feels good, until it doesn't. So how do you break free? You start by recognizing that none of this was random. Every encounter, every initiation, every ritual was designed to pull you further from your source. But now you've woken up, and you're not powerless. Here's what you do. You renounce, out loud. Name the practices, name the covenants, speak the rituals, and cancel them in the name of Jesus. You pray directly, boldly, not to the universe, not to ancestors, not to unnamed gods, but to the living God, through His Son. And when you pray, you don't beg. You declare, because you've been given authority, not by initiation but by inheritance. Your spiritual sovereignty isn't something you earn, it's something you claim. Say it. I renounce every oath, ritual, agreement, and energy exchange made under deception. I cancel every ritual act. I break every soul tie. I reject every spirit not from the true and living God. I seal my spirit, soul, body, and energy field in the blood of Jesus Christ. And you don't stop at words. You cleanse your space. You remove every object tied to the old systems, books, statues, jewelry, symbols, clothing, music, even if it's beautiful, especially if it's beautiful. Because darkness often hides in beauty. Then you ask the Holy Spirit to fill every space that was once occupied by counterfeit light. And you stay alert. Discernment isn't fear, it's clarity. It's your spirit's radar system. When something doesn't feel right, don't rationalize it, don't intellectualize it. Ask for confirmation. Pause before you participate. Because not every healing circle is harmless. Not every meditation is neutral. Not every energy worker is aligned with truth. You were given the spirit of truth for a reason. Use it. Your soul is valuable. That's why it's being targeted. You weren't attacked because you were weak. You were targeted because you're dangerous to the enemy. Because your light, when aligned with truth, becomes a weapon. Your voice, once freed, becomes a sword. Your story, once spoken, becomes deliverance for others. But you can't delay. This isn't a warning for someday, it's for now. Because the lines are being drawn. The symbols are no longer subtle, the rituals are no longer hidden, and the enemy is no longer pretending to play nice. You don't get to be neutral anymore. You either align or get absorbed. You either renounce or remain entangled. You either fight or get fed on. And this is your call to fight, not with fear, not with aggression, but with clarity, conviction, and love. Because this is not about religion, this is about rescue. And you're being invited into total freedom, not just from darkness, but into identity, into truth, into light that doesn't take, but gives. You don't need to fear what's been done to you. You only need to choose what comes next. Because now you know. Now you see. And once you see, you can't go back to pretending. You were made for more than symbols, more than secret handshakes, more than rituals that drain your soul and call it ascension. You were made to walk in open light, not behind veils, not through coded doors, but face to face, with the one who formed you, knew you, and never once abandoned you. This is your moment. You renounce what held you, to reclaim what was stolen, to step out of imitation power and into real eternal authority. So say it with your whole being. I break every agreement made in darkness. I declare my allegiance to Jesus Christ, the only truth, the only way, the only life. I seal my soul in His light forever. And now walk free, because the chains are gone, and the light that fills you now, it doesn't come from ritual, it comes from redemption. Sometimes I still think about it. What if I had never walked away? What if I had stayed just a little longer, climbed a little higher, learned the next ritual, made the next offering, whispered the next oath? Would I have gained more power? Maybe. Would I have become more spiritually advanced? Perhaps. But at what cost? Because I remember the look in my eyes during those years. The light was gone. I was sharp, yes, charismatic, knowledgeable, disciplined, but hollow, disconnected, like a soul living behind tinted glass. And I know now, with absolute clarity, if I had stayed, I would have lost myself completely, piece by piece, not all at once, but gradually. And that's how the darkness works, not with shock and awe, but with inches. Seduction, enticement, just enough light to keep you walking forward toward the pit. That's why this matters. That's why I'm speaking now. Because the real secret isn't hidden in dusty books or ancient orders. The real secret is that you don't need secret knowledge at all. You need truth. And truth doesn't come with veils and riddles and passwords and blood-bound oaths. Truth comes as a person, a presence, a name that breaks every chain. You're not here by accident. You didn't click this video out of curiosity. You were drawn, maybe by your spirit, maybe by desperation, maybe because something inside you knows you've been walking too close to the edge, and now you're being asked one question. A question no ritual will ever dare to ask you directly. Whom will you serve? Because whether you realize it or not, you're already serving something. Something is already shaping your thoughts, your energy, your patterns. Something is already claiming space in your life. Maybe it calls itself the universe. Maybe it promises empowerment. Maybe it hides behind ancestors, guides, goddesses, or sacred masculine archetypes. But strip away the masks and ask yourself, does it free you, or does it feed on you? Because here's the truth most will never tell you. There is no neutral power in the spiritual realm. You're either drawing from the source of life, or from a system designed to mimic it. And imitation light will always cost you more than it gives. That's why you need to decide. Not tomorrow. Not after more research. Not after one last spell or one final reading. Now, you've seen behind the curtain. You know what's really being worshipped in those hidden rooms. You know what it feels like when your energy is no longer your own. You know what it's like to be manipulated by forces you once invited in. So now it's your move. Not just a shift in belief, but a shift in allegiance. Because light isn't a concept, it's a kingdom, and you can't live in two kingdoms at once. I'm not asking you to become religious. I'm not asking you to attend a building or quote a book perfectly. I'm asking you to make a choice, to stop entertaining counterfeit light, to stop opening doors that look beautiful but lead to bondage, to stop dabbling in energies that sound empowering but lead you empty, and to finally fully surrender. To say, I choose truth, I choose light that doesn't lie, I choose Jesus not as a religion but as a rescue. Because at the end of all your searching, all your rituals, all your spells, all your initiations, this is the only truth that will remain. You were made for Him, and nothing else will satisfy. There's no going back to not knowing, no unseeing what's been revealed. You've seen behind the curtain, you've felt the weight of false power, you've tasted the illusion, and now you hunger for what's real. So here it is, your final challenge. Don't just feel convicted. Don't just agree silently. Make the choice, out loud, in the spirit. Declare your freedom, claim your light, and walk away from every system, every symbol, every oath that ever tried to own your soul. Say it now. I choose truth over secrecy. I choose surrender over ritual. I choose Jesus, the true light, because the moment you speak it, everything shifts. Chains fall, doors close, and heaven begins to move on your behalf, not because you performed it perfectly, but because you finally chose. So, what will you do now? You may be feeling the pull even now, that tension between what you once believed and what your soul is now beginning to recognize. That's the clash of kingdoms, the friction between a former identity built on illusion and a new one being forged in truth. And yes, it hurts. Letting go of what once empowered you can feel like death, a kind of spiritual mourning. Because it wasn't all darkness, there were moments that felt real. Times when you felt awakened, alive, tapped into something beyond the veil. The energy was real, the sensations were real, but the source was not. And that's the part many can't accept. They confuse energy with truth, power with purity, presence with holiness. Just because something responds doesn't mean it's good. Just because something listens doesn't mean it loves you. Demons listen too, and they're more than happy to offer answers, at the cost of your freedom. So here's the final layer of the trap: attachment. Not just to rituals or systems, but to the identity you built around them. When you walk away, it's not just about abandoning false spirits. It's about letting go of a version of yourself that found meaning in mystery, pride in power, and safety in control. But you are not what you practiced. You are not your past. And you are not beyond redemption. That's the scandal of grace. It doesn't just cleanse, it replaces. It doesn't just forgive, it rewrites. And where the occult gave you knowledge laced with bondage, Christ gives you truth sealed with freedom. But you have to step into it. It's not enough to expose the lie. You have to embrace the truth, fully, publicly, energetically, because every spiritual system leaves residue, and the enemy doesn't surrender ground you haven't reclaimed. This is why renunciation is so important, because it's not just a statement, it's an eviction notice, a line drawn in the spirit that says, no more access, no more confusion, no more control. And when you speak it from a place of genuine authority, darkness flees, not out of fear of you, but out of fear of what's in you now. That's what they never told you in the lodge, the coven, the temple, that once you carry his spirit you become the threat, not because of rituals, but because of your restoration, not because of secret names, but because of the name that is above every name. There will be those who try to silence your testimony, who say you're exaggerating, fear-mongering, crazy, but they don't know what you've seen. They haven't stood in the circle. They haven't tasted the empty fire. They haven't watched their soul drift from their body in a room full of smiling witches. They haven't cried themselves to sleep unsure whether the voice in their head is theirs or something else. But you have. And that's why your voice is needed now more than ever. Because you're not just a survivor. You're a signal, a lighthouse in the fog for others still trapped in the performance, the programming, the spiritual slavery of systems that masquerade as light. You have the authority to break generational patterns, to expose hidden strongholds, to speak truth in spaces where everyone else is too afraid. You carry keys now, not to secret rooms, but to freedom. And don't be surprised when your presence begins to agitate darkness in others. That's what light does. It stirs, it reveals, it confronts. And many won't be ready for that. But you don't dim to make them comfortable. You shine to make them curious. Let your peace speak louder than their power. Let your freedom provoke their questions. Let your deliverance make them reconsider what they've been calling truth. And when they ask, tell them everything. Not for attention, but for awakening. Because this isn't just about you anymore. It's about the ripple effect. It's about the girl silently researching energy healing in her bedroom. It's about the man repeating affirmations, not realizing he's summoning old gods. It's about the seeker who knows something's off, but can't yet name it. You are their bridge. So live in the light with boldness, speak with clarity, walk with discernment, and when the temptation to look back arises, to reminisce, to doubt, to re-engage the old energy, remember what it cost you, and remember who carried you out. Jesus didn't just save you from darkness, He's teaching you how to walk in light. And this walk? It's not about perfection. It's about purity, alignment, transparency. No more hidden rooms, no more coded language, no more double lives. Just truth. Just grace. Just a soul on fire with the real light. And the moment you embrace that truth fully, the darkness loses. Not just in your life, but in every life you're called to touch from here on out.